Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Amparucci and today I'm going to show you guys how to make a Fur-It cake inspired by the popular Fur-It Walk meme. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up and also don't forget to click down below and subscribe to my channel. To get started, I have a 12 by 16 inch sheet pan and two 4-inch round cake pans which I've lined with parchment paper and greased. And I'm going to be filling these cake pans with chocolate cake batter. Now for the sheet pan, I'm using a chocolate jelly roll recipe because it's spongier and it's going to be perfect for rolling this into that jelly roll shape that I want. Then I fill both of my 4-inch cake pans with some of the chocolate cake batter. I bake the cake at 350 degrees until a toothpick inserted in the center of the cake comes out clean and there's no batter on it. Once the sheet pan is completely baked, I grab some oven mitts and I flip my sheet pan upside down onto a sheet of parchment paper which I've dusted with powdered sugar. And this is just going to help the cake not stick once I roll it into that jelly roll shape. Then I begin rolling the cake horizontally, and I keep it like this for about 20 minutes. Now I bake my small 4-inch cakes at 350 degrees, and these took about 10 to 12 minutes. And I let these cool completely at room temperature. Now that my chocolate jelly roll cake is completely cool, I removed that from the parchment paper and I unrolled it. And now I'm going to fill this cake with my delicious whipped chocolate Nutella ganache. If you want my whipped chocolate Nutella ganache recipe, click the I up above. Once I finish filling the cake, I roll this back into that jelly roll shape and I keep it like that and refrigerate it for a few minutes. Here I have a cake board that I made myself out of 2 cake boards, and this is 16.5 inches length by 5 inches width, which is a perfect size for the Fur-It cake. So I spread a little bit of chocolate ganache onto the cake board and I add my cake onto there, and that's going to help the cake stick onto the cake board. And now with a bread knife, I'm just going to carve the sides of the cake and taper them down to create the Fur-It body shape. I make sure to save the cake scraps that I'm carving out of the cake because I'm going to need these later on for something. Now I remove my 4-inch cakes from the cake pans, and I'm going to sandwich these together and add these at the front part of the jelly roll cake, and this is going to be Fur-It's head. So what I'm going to do is just completely level off the dome top out of one of the cakes, and I'm going to level off a tiny part of the other cake. I add one of the flat ends onto the jelly roll cake and stick that on using a bit of my Nutella ganache, and I fill it with some Nutella ganache and I sandwich the other cake on top of that. Now I'm going to cover the entire cake in the chocolate Nutella ganache. And this is what it looks like once it is completely iced. I know it looks really strange, but trust me, it's going to come together shortly. I'm going to put this in the refrigerator for a few minutes to set. Remember the cake scraps I told you that I saved? I mixed those with a bit of the Nutella ganache and I made this cake pop consistency crumble, and I'm going to make Fur-It's ears out of this. So I just work the crumbs in my hand and I create a pointed shape on top and flatten out the bottom, and it gives me the perfect Fur-It ear shape. And I'm just using a bit of melted chocolate to glue this onto a toothpick, and then I insert them on both sides of the top of Fur-It's head. So what I did here is with a sharp fondant tool, I just scored where each of Fur-It's rings are, And he has exactly 7 rings. And they divide from like a light cream color to brown, light cream color brown, light cream color brown. And it's basically a pattern, and then that upper part of his body is brown and half of his face is that cream color. So what I have here is some brown fondant, which I colored myself using brown and a bit of copper, and I have some ivory colored fondant. So I'm going to start at the back of Furret's tail, and that part is the ivory color. So I'm just rolling out the ivory colored fondant, and I'm going to cover that back part of Furret's tail. And I just use my hands and a fondant smoother to smooth the fondant onto the cake. And using my X-Acto knife, I just trim the excess fondant around the sides. Now I come in with my brown fondant and I cover that next ring layer. And I just follow the little score mark that I made, and I trim off the excess fondant with my X-Acto knife. And then I do the next layer, which is ivory. And what I'm doing is I'm using a food safe paintbrush, and I'm dipping that in hot water, and I'm rubbing that onto the ganache because chocolate ganache sets really firm, and the hot water is just going to act like a glue and help the fondant stick onto the ganache. So I continue this pattern doing the ivory, brown, ivory, brown, ivory until I cover all the rings. Once I cover all the rings, I just smooth it all together with my fondant smoother. And now I'm going to move on to the top half of Furret's body. And the top half of his body is the brown color. And as you can see, I made some score marks just following a picture of Furret where the division of the ivory and the brown happened. So I'm just adding the brown fondant, and I'm actually doing this in 2 separate sections. So I'm going to cover this top half, and then right in the middle of his head, I'm going to cut that off. And again, with my fondant tool, I just scored that division in the front part of Furret's face where the ivory and the brown divide. So now I'm going to add the ivory color on the bottom half of Furret's face. And again, with my fondant tool, I just marked where I need to cut off any excess fondant. And with my X-Acto knife, I cut that excess fondant off. Now I cover the remaining top half of Furret's face with the brown fondant. And to make it easier, I just cut that little V shape and I insert that in the spaces, and it fit perfectly, and I'm just going to trim off the excess fondant. To do the ears, this was actually the trickiest part. I just grabbed a piece of fondant and I wrapped that around the entire bottom half of the ear. And then Furret's ear has like this little V-shaped cutout at the top part of his ear. So I'm just leaving that little space, and using my X-Acto knife, again, I'm just going to trim off all the excess fondant, and then I'm going to add the ivory fondant in that open space. Now for Furret's front paws and feet, I'm just using fondant to make these. So I have a thick tube of ivory fondant here, and I'm going to cut that in half, and these are going to be Furret's front paws. So I add these onto the front part of Furret's body. And now the actual paw part is made with brown fondant. So what I did is I just created a ball of brown fondant. I flattened it out a bit, and then with my X-Acto knife I slit 2 lines in the middle, and then I spread that, and as you can see, it looks like a paw. Now for the back feet, those are completely ivory, so I rolled out a ball of ivory fondant, and then I cut that in half because it's gonna look like only half of his paw sticking out because of the way that his body is. So what I did was I cut each circle in half, and then I did 1 slit, and I'm gonna tuck that on the side. And you see what I mean? If I would have did the entire paw, it would just look weird. So it looks like the other half of his paw is hiding under his body. Now for his cute face, I just rolled out some black circles of fondant and flattened them out, and I'm going to add these to be the eyes. And to make his cute little mouth, I just rolled out a thin tube of black fondant, and I create 2 U shapes and connect them in the middle. Then to finish off his face, he has a little twinkle in his eyes, so I grab some white fondant and I add that in the center top part of his eyes. And I cut out 4 thin strips of brown fondant, and I add 2 on each side of the bottom part of his face, and those are going to be his whiskers. Isn't he adorable? Now to make this cake even more wholesome, I decided to do the little wholesome hearts. And what I have is just different colors of fondant. I use red, green, yellow, pink, purple, and blue. And I have some heart-shaped cutters. And I'm just going to use my heart cutters to cut out the hearts in all the color fondant. And I am just wetting my cake board with a bit of water. You can also use piping gel if you'd like. And this is just to help the fondant hearts stick. So I'm just going to start adding all the fondant hearts around the exposed cake board. And this super cute Furret cake is complete. I mean, can this cake be any more wholesome? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I am super happy with the way it turned out. I absolutely love it. I think this is like one of the cutest cakes I have ever made. If you guys enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up, share it with all your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. But before you go, I'm going to show you what this cake looks like cut open, and I even have a special appearance from Furret himself, and let's just say he was not too happy.